It's time and time again for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, designated driver, mouth runner, and whether you're new to the show or a frequent flyer, you're in for a ton of talk here on our free-speaking, big thinking show for everyone, whatever decade or century you started watching, reading, or listening along to the ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who, within sniffing distance now of that 60th anniversary year. I can't wait to see what's coming up, and we're counting it all down here on Type 40. Yeah, come and step into this conversation with us. We're sort of playing catch up TV, you could say. Catch-up TV is an expression that we use. We use it in Britain. I don't know if you use it anywhere else, but we're definitely playing catch-up with TV this time, bringing us up to date, sort of, with what's been going on in the most recent incarnation of Doctor Who and those episodes that have most recently aired on BBC One, BBC America, and all over the world, wherever you are, wherever you're watching Doctor Who, or wherever you're streaming it. I've sort of lost track about where we can get it now. But we'll find out when we connect with you and with one another here on this edition of Type 40. And we're bringing back not just the Doctor, but he's bravely venturing back to the mic, back to Type 40 to help me pick my way through this. It's the true believer in the culture clashing, Mr. Kyle Wagner.
It's good to be here, but there's a severe lack of jelly babies in the green room. I just got to bring that point up. You need to restock. How long has it been? Because they were feeling a little stale. Yeah, and we got to talk about that. We need to remodel this green room because this is not a good look.
No, it's not a good look. It's not aging well, and it's not that old, is it? The Jodie Whittaker 13th Doctor TARDIS interior. I can inform you that, Kyle, that set no longer exists. It has been struck. I think it's probably been disposed of in landfill somewhere, but I do hope that they sort of smashed it into as many little pieces as they could. It's probably what they did.
You know what they did with it, Dan? They put it the same place that they put all those old Atari 2600 ET cartridges in that landfill somewhere out in the middle of the desert here in the US.
I think it's quite likely. It's the kind of set for a TV show that I always say that it reminds me of Dancing on Ice, which is a reality show that we get over here. It's a bit like Dancing with the Stars, but in Dancing on Ice, they get these celebrities and they get them ice skating instead. So this is what it reminds me of. But wherever they go next, really, it couldn't be a great deal worse. I wonder what Charlotte Shields has got to say about it, Carl. Should we ask her? Yes, back again. She's back. She was on all of the Flux episodes, I think, last year, very, very bravely. And yes, back for more. Can't get enough of the 13th Doctor.
Oh, but we had a chance for it to change in this episode, and we didn't get it. Thank you, Chibnall. My little tiny hope got dashed.
Yes, this is one of those episodes, isn't it, I suppose, where it could have gone absolutely anywhere. We talked about Flux when was that on? It was from about October. It started at Halloween, did it? So we were talking about it in October right the way through to early December, and it was a really intense 6 weeks. I think you were on a few of those, definitely, weren't you, Kyle? You were on most of them, Charlotte. And for all that it felt like it was an improvement in some respects on what we got in series 11 and 12, it was just zapped your energy somehow. 6 weeks seemed like 6 months, I think, Charlotte.
I think it was improvements with some of the actors that he brought along. There was some little things that improved, but the still overall issues were very glaring. And because it wasn't supposed to connect, it really showed up Chibnall's lack of being able to develop things, I would argue. So
now we're at a place where we're sitting now in the middle of 2022, there's even less. There's just 90 minutes more screen time left to air. But at this point, we're well into single figures here. And you think, okay, they can kind of clean house a little bit. And a big special and a big public holiday is a chance to just entertain the masses, isn't it, Carl? That's how it should be.
Well, and here's the problem is that Chibnall, and through this run, there's no direction. He is so trying to go in 18 different directions, completely rewrite Doctor Who history. And it reminds me of this TARDIS set, because this TARDIS set is almost claustrophobic with these crystal fingers kind of coming around, and that's what it's felt like to be, at least for me, a Doctor Who fan through this incarnation of the Doctor, is that it's just like the walls are closing in around us, because it's bound and determined to make it be what I think it should be and what nobody else has done before me. It's my Doctor Who, and that's it. And it's been so frustrating, and it's something that I've had this conversation with other things we've discussed on the Fandom Podcast Network, is the inability of creators, when they're dealing with something that has a rich history, of actually respecting the history where it came from. And it's sad.
It's sad for me, Kyle, that people commentating on other franchises and just the pop culture generally can hold this show, our show, up as a shining example of how not to do it, of how to mismanage all those things you were talking about, and how to run something into the ground.
Yeah, well, and I do think that it's starting to turn a little bit, and because I think Hollywood has paid attention in some lessons. I can think of 3 examples of franchises that have come out with something recently where I think they paid a little bit more respect to where they came from. Ghostbusters Afterlife, with how they handled the whole Harold Ramis situation. I think this new Predator movie that just came out, Prey, really handles the franchise and the history of the franchise well. And of course, the big thing here, which is just past Titanic for the number 7 spot of all-time money-making films, Top Gun Maverick, actually is such a tribute to the original film. And it's but still so good in its own right, if not better than the original. And I think people are starting to figure it out, is instead of trying to wipe the history like they've kind of done with Doctor Who, or maybe that other franchise called Star Wars a little bit, where they've tried to make massive changes to certain things. I think people are starting to realize that we need to still pay respects to where we came from. And especially with all the stuff that's happened since this episode came out. And a lot of stuff has happened, including, we know a new Doctor's coming. We know Tennant's coming back. We know Russell T Davies is coming back. I think the history of Doctor Who is going to be put back into place.
So when you heard the news that David Tennant was coming back there, Kyle, and that we were getting Neil Patrick Harris playing the villain, or at least one of the villains of the 60th anniversary event, whatever that's going to be, how excited were you? Surprised by Neil Patrick Harris being announced, and how excited are you for all of this? Because we haven't really spoken about it.
To get Tennant and get the Doctor and Donna back, which is what's coming, is absolutely phenomenal. But it also tells you how badly Doctor Who's been messed up, because you're having to basically play your biggest card at this point. The only other thing that would have even gotten a reaction like this was to bring back Matt Smith and Karen Gillan at this point. I mean, but when they announced Neil Patrick Harris, I admit I was shocked. That came out of nowhere, but I love it too, because I think Neil Patrick Harris is the kind of actor who just can merge into that Doctor Who world and be an absolutely amazing addition to it. And I'm really curious to see how this is going to play out. And Neil Patrick Harris, if they need a little over the top, he can give you that. If they need something a little bit wacky, he can give you that. I'm very intrigued and excited for what the possibilities are for this.
Doesn't seem to be anything that Neil Patrick Harris can't do. You had never really seen him before in much, had you, Charlotte? He's a bit of an unknown quantity to you.
I'd seen like clips of him in How I Met Your Mother, because on the UK that's always on repeat. Even if you don't watch it, you catch it. But I was watching It's a Sin anyway, because it was Russell's latest work, and I wanted to sort of watch something that was modern Russell, not the Russell I remember from 2005. And he was in that, and I really enjoyed his little part in that. So from what Carl was saying, I've seen him play actually quite a reserved character, quite a quiet character. So the fact that he can do such a range is what's got me excited. And the fact that it looks like, we obviously don't know exactly who he's playing, but it looks like it's a character we haven't seen for a while. And I'm excited that it's not like a master again, or a villain that we've seen a lot in the newer run. It looks like Russell's going back a lot, which has got me excited.
I just want to throw this out for you, Charlotte. If you really want to get something where you can really see Neil Patrick Harris play a whole bunch of different sides, go find somewhere online. I know it's streaming in a few places. Dr. Horrible Sing-Along blog. It
I've
was
heard
done
of it.
by
I've not watched it.
It was done by Josh Whedon, which I know is a name that's fairly toxic right at the moment, but he is phenomenal in it. And to give you an idea of what he can be when he wants to be outlandish and over the top, it's a great thing to watch. Of course, I go back here in the States with Neil Patrick Harris all the way back to his Doogie Howser MD days when he was playing the
when he was
a child actor playing the genius young doctor. But yeah, Neil Patrick Harris is just one of is a gift to people. He can do so much. How I Met Your Mother, his role as Barney and How I Met Your Mother is iconic, and he's done so many great things. And like I said, I think he's a fabulous addition to the Doctor Who family.
So do I. I mean, I think I don't know if he counts as a national treasure. Do you have national treasures in America?
We do. I think people would. I don't know if he'd be considered nationwide a national treasure, but I can say this within the realm of fandom, he is absolutely beloved.
Because I think the Doctor Who does have a history of being able to attract people like that, people who are beloved and who've been around a while and can probably pick and choose their projects. And so the idea that an actor as busy and as versatile and as international as Neil Patrick Harris would be involved in any episode, let alone the 60th anniversary extravaganza, whatever it's going to be. I find that really exciting too. But I wanted to ask you about one of our national treasures too, though, Carl, very, very briefly. Because last time we got together, Charlotte, we paid tribute to Bernard Cribbins, didn't we? And
Yes.
he was a 93-year-old British actor and entertainer, Kyle. And I would imagine that the very first time you saw him would probably have been on Doctor Who. But did you hear the sad news too?
Yeah, I did hear the sad news. Actually, I heard it I woke up that morning he passed and had the news flashed on my phone. And I looked in our group chat that we have and nobody had said anything about it, so I posted it in there. So I figured it had happened pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, 93, he lived a fantastic life. And yeah, I mean, he was a treasure, especially in that last run of Tenet. And it was the thing about him as far as his run in Doctor Who was he was such a fun counter a little bit to the Doctor in the aspect of everybody cared about him, and he kind of made the Doctor care about him even more, especially even though it was a time when maybe the Doctor was trying to distance himself from humanity, but it's Bernard brings him back and he's caring for Bernard and Donna and everything with that was just, it was him and Tennant together was one of the highlights of Tennant's run. I have no problem saying that.
Had a magic about it, didn't it? And Bernard Cribbins will be very sadly missed here in the UK. He's just always been around, and you know, I think I said before, you'd like these people, these characters, to go on forever. You know, Nichelle Nichols also sadly passed away at the age of 89, didn't she? I would imagine it's very much the same in America regarding a figure like her who's just always been there. But I suppose all we can do is pay our respects, give our appreciation for that which they have done for us during their lifetimes, and then continue to sort of to go back to it and to treasure it after they've gone.
Yeah, I think it's different, and I'm going to bring this up because I think it's a fair comparison right now. You have Bernard, who was 93. We could kind of prepare for it. We knew that this time was coming. It's sad, but we can celebrate it. But then when we compare it to Chadwick Boseman, because the trailer for Black Panther Wakanda Forever just came out, that still hits me hard emotionally because we lost him way too young, and we didn't have it in the back of our minds this was coming. We were prepared for it.
It was that was a tragedy, losing that actor at the height of his career, really, when he seemed to have so much to give.
Because I think he was on his way, or if not already there, to an iconic status. But I think we talk about Michelle, we talk about Bernard, and their place was set. They were set. They were universally beloved. Bernard, especially, I know with the Doctor Who fandom, was I can't think of anybody who ever spoke a ill word about Bernard. And you know, it's sad, but I can at least with this situation, I can feel good in honoring what he's done and what he brought us, and the smiles he put on faces, and just what he brought to Doctor Who.
Yeah, and also the fact that we know we've got him for one more instance. I think that was, I don't want to say a relief, that's not the right word, but it made it a bit easier, I think, in the UK, because we knew we were going to be able to say goodbye to him on the screen.
Yeah.
Which I think is going to be, we've sort of said in the UK, it was charged enough the 60th, but especially in this country, I think now, it's going to be really, like,
Very
emotionally charged now, considering his passing.
That's all to come on the 60th anniversary event, whenever that's going to be. And we'll be here on Type 40 talking about all of that too. And doubtless we'll be laughing and crying together as whatever plays out. That's to come in due course. But in the meantime, if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away. If you know where to look, there's well over 100 now. God blimey. Great conversations, reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regulars and some pretty awesome guests. We know there's something for every fan at type40.podbean.com. There'll be more about all of that a little later on, as well as a couple of minutes for us to make contact with the matrix of all knowledge that we call the Fandom Podcast Network for a word about all the other amazing podcasts, all those conversations that are going on over there. Okay, that's enough of all of that, I think. Time to get stuck in to bring us back to the recent present. I suppose it's present enough. Get ready. Hold on to your seats, everyone, because this could get painful. This is a Chris Chibnall penned episode of Doctor Who. Going in. Hold tight. Hold on. There it is. Okay, yeah, let's rip off the plaster. That's what they say. Make it less painful in the long run. And yeah, we're going to begin a look at the 13th Doctor specials with Eve of the Daleks, which was written by Chris Chibnall, the showrunner stroke executive producer of Doctor Who. Well, he was up until whenever that was. When was it? Last September, October time? They're long gone, all of them. And just in case you gave that one a miss, or you've forgotten about it in the meantime, because we all had. This is how it went. It says, welcome to New Year's Eve, to the New Year's Eve from hell. Sarah is working again, and Nick is her only customer again. So it's the same old. Except this year, their countdown to midnight will be the strangest and deadliest they've ever known. Why is an executioner Dalek targeting these two people in this place on this night? Why are they having to live through the same moments over and over? Can't the Doctor, Yaz, and Dan save them? Then we will all survive into the new year. Yeah, this was originally broadcast on New Year's Day 2022, written by Chris Chibnall, directed by Annetta Laufer. It was produced by Sheena Buktawansing, and the executive producer was Matt Stevens. He's been the executive producer all the way through, hasn't he, alongside Chris Chibnall. I think I've only ever seen the guy interviewed once, so I forget everything about him. Okay, where can we start with this? The way I look at this, Kyle, is that it is a mashup of two, not just genre staples, but Doctor Who staples too. So we've got the time loop. Every successful, any long-running show that managed to clock up a full season, come to think of it, within this genre, they do a time loop episode, don't they? Doctor Who's done it before with the Armageddon Factor, Heaven Sent, Megalos, that kind of story. But also in there is the Base Under Siege story too. That was a Doctor Who staple right back in the 60s when Trout was playing the part. You've had episodes like Cold War, Mummy on the Orient Express, I suppose you could say, was a kind of Base Under Siege story. This is in that mold, isn't it? But are these molds of story worth going back to over and over again? Is it a sign of a writer and a showrunner that's run out of ideas, or is it more about the strength of that core principle as being really reliable, that you can deliver something that people will get on board with fast? Where do you sit with this?
They're two very popular and strong tropes in science fiction, and when the right writer has his hands on them and can add his own twist and give it something from even a little bit of a different perspective, it's great. When it's Chris Chibnall, and at this point a very checked out Chris Chibnall, who not only plays it as lazily as possible in this episode and gives us characters that we cannot get emotionally invested in because They are terribly written. It goes off the rails so quickly. And the sad part of it is that there is actually, in my opinion, this might be the most chemistry we've seen with this version of Teen TARDIS in this episode, as far as just the chemistry between the three of them. But you have two new characters that you just can't get invested in, and one, I'm sorry, is just downright is dislikable. Is almost in a way irredeemable, and then you add in the aspect of a time loop, and in this case, again, I feel kind of like they didn't bring anything new to the time loop. You know, they didn't give you any kind of twist. It just was, you got to put something out there. Oh, we'll take time loop, we'll take Under Siege, put it together. There you go. That's what this episode felt like.
It's quite early in the episode where the Doctor, Yaz, and Dan, they turn up. It's clearly not long after the whole events of Flux, because they're sort of mopping up. The TARDIS is resetting, isn't it? So they're... yeah, it was last week, doesn't it? Because Dan says at one point, you saved the universe last week. It's a very short period of time later. And they plop them right in. And rather than get into some sort of big explanation of it, I think Dan actually says, oh, it's a bit like Groundhog Day, isn't it? Which is, very postmodern and all the rest of it. But Groundhog Day itself is a 30-year-old movie. I just think it's, again, a bit of a lazy reach from Chris Chibnall.
But my question would be, Chibnall had to know at this point he was done. And so my question is he at this point where he's just like, I'm mailing it in? I'm just like, I know I'm out of here and I'm mailing it in.
This is the third special on the trot, hasn't it, Charlotte? The third special on the bounce where he's brought back the Daleks in the New Year episode. I keep going to call it the Christmas special. I can't use the word festive. The expression festive special is so asinine. This, I think, more than any other, could have been a Christmas. It could have just as easily have been set on Christmas Eve as New Year's Eve, in my view.
Yeah. But in the other ones, it's felt like that. They've all felt like he's not really made enough changes to justify it being a New Year's special versus a Christmas one. And I think, especially watching this again, it felt so nailed in with the writing, with how the time loop was dealt with. It was done so simply. And the thing that I think is a big mistake is the whole appeal of a time loop is that the characters sort of slowly understand and slowly get better, and you see them get better. Like I always forget what the movie's called. Live, Die, Repeat, I think is one of the titles.
Yeah, The Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow. Edge of Tomorrow,
like,
yeah.
That's the example. If you want to have a more modern example of this type of story, and you see that in Tom Cruise's character, and within like the first loop, they're all working out, oh, we've done this before. And it's like, Chris, you've just taken away the whole appeal of a time loop story. You've just gone shortcut, like, straight away.
And I suppose the thing that he's done, which makes sense, this is just an hour or 57 minutes worth of screen time, is that he hasn't created this sort of raft of like a dozen brand new characters. There's only really the 2/3. You can only really count the two. There's only 2 extra characters in here that he's got to sort of build and slot into the dynamic with the 3 regulars. So he hasn't overburdened it in that respect. And yet, just as you say, Kyle, the new characters, Sarah, played by Aisling B, and Nick, played by Ajani Salmon, they still feel like underdeveloped somehow. And he's got all this time and all these loops for us to really get to know them. And it's still not happening, is it?
It's not only it's not happening. Nick is just dull. Let's be honest with you. And he is just dull.
I was trying to work out whether it was the actor that's dull, Ajani Salmon, who I think I've seen in other things. He's probably a perfectly nice guy. I was trying to work out whether he was playing it deliberately dull or whether the actor is dull.
Yeah, I can't figure that out because I haven't really seen him in anything else. And Sarah is just irredeemable. There is no good qualities about the Sarah character. She's
I'd have to agree.
She's self-centered, and it doesn't really change. Even at the end of this episode, she might realize, this guy really likes me, but she really didn't change that much. The only thing that to be honest with you, with this episode, the only two things that I actually found somewhat intriguing, and I'll give Chibnall a little bit of credit for this, is the concept of the time loop countdown, and in such a short time frame. Like they only have like
Chris
7 minutes.
Chris Chibnall loves a countdown. There's countdown clocks in the majority of his episodes somewhere on the line. So you could say this was always going to happen. This is the lowest hanging fruit for a writer like him.
Yeah. And but you know what? Of all the characters, the one who I thought actually came across the most interesting to me was Dan. Who in the Flux was just whatever. And I thought in this one, he came across more selfless and just more of a fleshed out character here than he ever did through the entire run of the Flex.
Well, just to backtrack a little bit, John Bishop joined us, Dan, didn't he, at the beginning of Flux, aka Series 13, whatever you want to call it. And in some ways, you could say that he's had an easy time of it because John Bishop has been pretty much playing John Bishop. But in other respects, he's had to do quite a lot of heavy lifting, hasn't he, Charlotte? Because he is, obviously, if you're playing yourself, I suppose you are going to know that character quite well. He's down on screen, but it's John Bishop, really. So you could say that they've given him a pretty easy job to do. But when he's the only person within most casts that feels relatable at all, that seems in a moment, the majority of the work of selling us on the urgency of this situation actually falls on him rather than the supposed lead character. And even the guest characters who should be the ones like us, and we're thinking, if that was us, that if we were working late that night, how would we react? But it's John Bishop. Carl's right, isn't it? It's John Bishop we go back to. Again, we look to him for some sort of normalcy.
Yeah, it's because John tends to get the more grounded lines. He tends to get the more realistic lines. Because you got Jodie every 5 minutes spouting off technobabble and trying to be like wacky. You've got Yaz, who's just now literally there to just dopey-eyed look at the Doctor. That's her role. And you got Nick, who I was just, by the end of the episode, I was saying, oh, future crime watch, E-fit. He was just like beyond a creep. It wasn't even funny. And Sarah, who was just there to sort of tell him off. So John was the only grounding force here because he was just the one going, there's Daleks, we're going to get shot. Can we not die? He wasn't giving anything amazing to work with. But I actually found some of the treatment of his character not very nice by the other characters.
No, I'd noticed that as well.
Because he did the heroic sacrifice, and that's what Carl was talking about in that one loop. And as soon as he does it, they're having a go at him within 5 minutes. They're having snide comments about him. And it's just like, oh, what have you two done? He's
because
the one
they're
who's
trying to convince us, aren't they? Charlotte, by this point, they're reinforcing the fact that Dan and Yaz were together for 4 years at one point, while the Doctor was, I can't remember what was, don't expect me to remember anything that went on in Flux. It was a nonsense then, it's a nonsense now. But I know they spent that 4 years together. And so I think we're supposed to believe that they bonded together. And he calls her Sheffield. I don't know what she calls him. I don't care.
I think it's Scouse. I think it's the whole regional thing they're playing off.
It's real short and, real low common denominator stuff. So they're trying to have that in play. And they talk about the Doctor behind her back in the way that Rory and Amy would, which can work. But because this incarnation of the Doctor is so not the Doctor, it's still this malformed version of the character that's just totally irredeemable at this point too. It's just not working because Jodie Whittaker, it's long past time. Game was over on this a long time ago. She hasn't convinced anybody that she's the Doctor. She's not convinced herself that she's the Doctor. Therefore, we look at these two characters, and again, I look at Mandip Gill. I've always tried to be charitable towards Mandip Gill because I've always felt that she's loved being part of this show, and she's sort of doing the minimum now as well. And the handbrake turns with the character every few episodes. Kyle,
has there ever been a character in Doctor Who that has been dumbed down as much as Yaz has from her introduction to now? Because that's how I felt about it.
Career woman who knew where she was going, who had a strong personality. Yeah, I think that's a fair call.
I mean, when we first get her, she's on a path. She knows she has her beliefs in the law, things like that. And then now she's just gooey eyed. Oh, I'm in love with the doctor, but I feel, and it's like you're in a. If anything, I look at that and go, you're in a toxic relationship. You need to get out because this is destroying the person you are. And that's how I've kind of viewed it to this point in these episodes. And
because she does so little. She treads water through the majority of it. Just as Charlotte says, she hardly does a single thing. She's only on screen to get to that point where I think about 15, 20 minutes before the end, she has one conversation with Dan. The rest of the time, she's there throwing the odd, insult in Dan's direction, just to sort of try and convince us that there's some sort of dynamic and chemistry between the regulars that we know is not there. We don't need to hear these things. We can see them on screen. We've been following the story up to now. I don't want to pick this thing apart because these are the episodes that obviously that are served up on public holidays, and they should be crowd pleasers. They should be quite simple. They should almost, in some respects, be sort of cartoon versions of Doctor Who, where we've got the boo hiss bad guys and the goodies are the goodies, and we know who, and the people who don't even watch the show regularly know who to root for, and the plot isn't too complicated, so that people can still follow it if they've had a couple of drinks. And I think this probably does that on paper. But watching each successive episode of Chris Chibnall's version of Doctor Who, and it doesn't really matter whether the one is better than the last, they never get any easier to sit through because it all looks and feels so tired.
I think that's the dialogue. If there's anything that stood out in this episode to try and say something a bit different, and not that I'm repeating myself, for me, the dialogue was so to the point. And I mean, as to everything felt like they were just saying it because of the script needed them to. Like nothing felt natural with this dialogue in the slightest. Especially as you sort of said this at the beginning, you said, oh, it's based on The Siege and Time Loop. I'll put in romantic comedy. Like some of the music was trying to be a romantic comedy. You obviously had Sarah and Nick and Yaz and the Doctor. And I'm sorry, with romantic comedy dialogue, it can't sound functional, which is what it did. And all the dialogue Chibnall has a bad habit of spelling stuff out, of saying stuff that we know anyway. He just thinks the character needs to say it out loud again for our sake, I don't know. But I felt like the dialogue was so like that this episode. I don't know how you two felt.
I think that when he does that, he's trying to convince himself and people watching that he's got a handle on this story and this script. I think that's the only reason he restates things over and over again. That's why the Doctor is continually a sort of a megaphone for exposition. There's not really a great deal else to the character that we see there. And in the past, with this, come to think of it, this is a rare instance where the Doctor and her companions are together most of the time. They occasionally break away, but not very often. Usually Chibnall does. In fact, the very first thing he does, come to think of it, is he separates the Doctor from everybody else, and she goes off and kind of has the adventure while they sit around and talk amongst themselves. In here, because they're in a confined space, I think he leans on those tropes and that framework to help him keep on track. But because it's such a workman-like script, as you were saying, Charlotte, then there's still no life. There's still no real life to it. It still feels like we'll get a special out because we've got to get a special out. There's just nothing. There's no bounce to it. There's no real stakes apart from the character of Sarah. This is her business, I suppose, at stake. We don't really know what the Doctor wants. It's a sort of. Sorry, we don't know what the Daleks want, sorry. It's as if they've sprung a trap on the Doctor, as if they've finally decided they're gonna trap the Doctor, going to seize that moment because they've registered that the TARDIS is there, the TARDIS is resetting, so the Doctor can't get in there. They're going to press their advantage now and trap the Doctor, which I suppose is fine. It's very sort of Looney Tunes, isn't it? Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, I suppose. But it just never really gets. It never builds out from that. And looking at the character of Sarah, this is played by Aisling Bea, who's a 38-year-old stand-up comedian turned actor. She's the star and writer too of this big comedy show that Channel 4 have got called This Way Up, which I've never heard of, to be fair, and has won numerous awards at things like the Edinburgh Fringe. But her acting, this is something relatively new. She had small parts in Holby City and Lewis and things like that, but she's never been technically an actress. And I think that shows. You give somebody like this a character like Sarah, who is so black and white. Like you say, Carl, she is unlikable, and it's there really, I suppose, for an actress like Aisling to flesh out with her personality. But there's very little there to help her, and maybe a more established actress would have been able to make a little more of it, have brought a little more nuance to it. And because I think we were supposed to like her, Kyle. I think we were supposed to be sympathetic towards her and see her in that kind of, as you were saying, Charlotte, the heroine of a romantic comedy, who may be her own worst enemy, but she's got a good heart, and she may talk to her mother like S, but she loves her really. But Aisling hasn't got the acting skill to raise that up. So we've got that, and then we've got the Nick character, who, as you say, Charlotte, is he supposed to be comic relief? Are we supposed to feel sorry for him, or are we supposed to will him to success? And I think at some points we do, but again, the actor seems that uninterested by what he's doing, that if they don't look like they care, if they don't look that their lives are in danger, then how can we believe in it? I think that Aisling Bea actually does manage to do that sometimes when she runs down a corridor to try and get away from something. I believe that she certainly runs a lot better on screen than Jodie does, and she's got a great face. It's just not happening. And Nick, it's just a charisma-free zone there, as far as I can see. I do feel frustrated by this, Kyle, because I think this was actually one of the better episodes of the Jodie Whittaker era, despite the fact I'm sort of slating it. But so I feel frustrated because I think it could have been a lot better, that they had something here.
Yeah, Dan, you just in your soliloquy there, you basically summed up the entire Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who. Because a couple of things. I want to go back to a point you made a few minutes ago about how when the Christmas specials came out, they were written for everybody. And even though they were written for everybody, they didn't insult the watcher's intelligence. They didn't insult the viewer's intelligence. You know, whether it was the Matt Smith era, the Peter Capaldi era, everything was intelligently written, but still in a way that people who maybe didn't know everything about Doctor Who could still absorb this in. This episode is so written down below people's intelligence level. And what you talked about as far as, you know, like having these people who are not necessarily actors, if they have the support system around them, if they have a good writer, if they have a good director, and in this case, everything's Chibnall, it just points to, I think, a big factor of, even for those who are still saying that, you know, what would Jodie have done with a different creative team around her? I think it gives them some ammunition. I'm not saying that, I don't think Jodie has ever been able to figure out the Doctor. And I think that's just as much on the actress for not being able to figure it out. But I do think it shows you that, to me, the inherent problem that has been through this iteration of Doctor Who is Chris Chibnall and the creative team. They can't get out of their own way. They can't they've got their actors so confused. And then when you bring in somebody like the person who played Sarah, who's not necessarily an actress by trade and has no support, then it goes off the rails. And I go back to the one when we had Berriman on as a guest, and you just felt a different energy and a different connection. And it's like he helped everybody understand what their roles were. And with just having that experienced actor who's experienced in Doctor Who and bringing this here, it just feels like, go be yourself, see what happens, or just go treat it like you're playing in your backyard with your imagination. And
the concept of a Doctor Who story set in a a self-storage center, I think it's quite a strong one. Obviously, self-storage centers, they didn't really exist 30 years ago. I think they probably did 20 years ago. So it's a very modern thing that we all see them, with certainly some in my local area dotted around here and there, kind of inconspicuous buildings that are always like perfectly squared. And I've never been inside one. I kind of wondered what they were like inside. So I think that's quite canny of Chris Chibnall. That's so canny, in fact, that I'm suspicious that it wasn't his idea. So I like that. And when I heard what the premise of this special was going to be, I thought, okay, he might finally have something here. But no. I want to talk very briefly about the Daleks, because it is obviously the third special in a row that they've been in on. Here we get some new weapons, don't we? Sort of jacked into the front of the Daleks, the executioner Dalek Charlotte. It's exciting. It sounds nasty, doesn't it? It sounds like the special weapons Dalek from the late 80s show. Just means that the guns rotate and fire slightly faster. They still only hit their target when they need to be hit, don't they?
That was my joke. I mean, the fact that you make the point that these are like special executioner Daleks, they've got the big gun. And I'm sorry, these guys would give stormtroopers a blush with the amount of shots missed. Like, I'm not one of those who can get uptight about that stuff. I'm like, oh, it's Daleks, of course. But because it was so prevalent, and there was so many shots of them in, like, because it's like you said, it's a self-storage area, so it's tight corridors. It's areas which should benefit a Dalek, surely. And the amount of times they would just run and there'd be like 50, it felt like about 50 shots around them that would just magically miss. I was just like, come on, Chips.
You stole my thunder, Charlotte, because I was going to say, did you ever hear about the Great Dalek Stormtrooper War? You should have, because everybody survived it. One of the things, though, too, and you talk about these special Daleks, is look how Dan just like, I'm just going to turn in one direction and just stay ahead of the Dalek shot. I'm like, okay, Daleks aren't quite that stupid. I'm like, the Dalek's going to turn in the opposite direction when he least expects it, if nothing else. And it's just, it
felt like a gag from a wacky children's adventure movie. Again, I've got nothing against those sort of children's adventure movies, but that's not what Doctor Who is supposed to be. It's more sophisticated than that.
The only thing that was missing in this was they should have went into one of the storage units and it should have been filled with Acme boxes.
And another thing I found really odd is, and I'm guessing this is like, I understand TV logic, like I said before, but the amount of times characters would just talk at the Dalek and the Dalek would respond and not shoot them and like have almost like witty comebacks. It felt like at times like, I am not Nick. Daleks don't have managers. And it's like, Daleks don't speak like that.
I think that was solely there because obviously the voice of the Daleks for all these years has been Nick Briggs. And I think it was an in-joke that was put in to amuse them and a few fans who are in the know. And that's that, really. I think that the Daleks it's viable to incorporate the Daleks into a story like this, again, particularly on a big bank holiday, and to lean into the part of them that is, I don't want to use the expression comic relief, but that is slightly absurd. The fact that they are Pepper Potts on wheels with the funny voices, and they're invincible, and yet they get beaten so often. I think it's okay to lean into that sometimes. If you've got a strong enough story. And I think that they were overconfident or just lazy. I don't know what it is. I just feel that it all contributes to making the Daleks seem lesser. And I can't help but wish that perhaps they'd have used another villain, another monster, not necessarily from Doctor Who's past, but something else. Because I do feel that every time that they bring the Daleks out like this and don't serve them well, that it diminishes them more and more and more and more. And it doesn't really matter what new funky weapons that they've got, or even if they've got a new coat of paint. It just does them down a lot. And it feels like another Doctor Who mainstay that's been run into the ground through, if not overuse, the careless use. I think that it's okay that characters that the Daleks can be, if not figures of fun, then we can enjoy them for what they are as cultural icons, but not like this. Not like this.
It's rough because Chibnall has basically decided the only time he was going to use the Daleks was for these specials, and obviously what happened in the Flux episodes there. And I like the fact that they actually tied that in a little bit, that this is why they were trying to get the Doctor this time. But it's because of how the show is being produced right now. And I look at what we have ahead. RTD has 10 times more work to get Doctor Who back than he ever did when he came back with Eccleston.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
He was writing for something that people knew and fondly remembered when he came back with Eccleston, and it just had been time, and he had to just kind of refresh people a little bit. Here, he's almost got to reverse engineer Doctor Who, and he's got a monumental task ahead of him to get this reset and right.
I want to acknowledge the fact that despite this episode being not what it could have been, being polite, I thought the direction was okay in a lot of places. I think it used the location, the setting quite well. This is a first-time director called Annetta Laufer. Again, this is somebody with practically no credits to her name, yet given the task of directing a huge special on a big public holiday for what is allegedly one of the British TV's biggest brands. But she is the founder of the Roman Candle Productions Company, which is noted for focusing on that black female-led film. So I think we could have the reason why she was employed there rather than on ability, because this is, again, another move directly out of the Chris Chibnall playbook, isn't it, Charlotte?
Yes, especially like you said, with the little of experience being chucked in, because the same thing happens for the next special. We get a director very similar. So for me, maybe because I've grown to quite like Jamie's style, that when it isn't him,
Magnus Stone.
Yeah, I think what's happened, and I've sort of thought about this, I think I really have started to like his style. So when it's not him, unless it's really bad, I don't really notice it. So I didn't notice it so much. Because
his style, I think, along with Sagan Akalola's music, which is very sort of Marmite for people, I think Jamie Magnus Stone's directing style is the only thing that's given this entire era any sense of texture and of being the world-class show that it keeps trying to tell us that it is. And so when he's not there, we're left with something which, and I don't want to do this director down, I think this could have gone a lot worse.
Oh, yes, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't terrible. I just happened
No, it wasn't
to not
terrible at all. Yeah. But as such, it does feel like we're watching another show altogether somehow, that it's still, that the entire production is running on fumes, and they can't wait to be out the door, I think, Kyle.
I think here, and I agree with you guys, this episode wasn't a bad episode.
No.
The frustrating part is this episode had so much more potential to it. And the fact that it went untapped, and it makes me wonder, hearing you guys talk, how many of these directors are coming in excited because they're doing Doctor Who and are so frustrated by the end of their episode or episodes because of everything with this run just feels like there are fingers always in the pot of soup that are stirring it, that are beyond the director's control, and that the directors are more like finger puppets. They're there, they're running things, but there's somebody still pushing things in certain directions that is the higher power is been hovering over this.
I know what you're saying. I think we get this with the writers too on Series 11 and Series 12. I think Chris Chibnall wrote most of Series 13 himself, didn't he? Where you can imagine people given their shot for writing or directing this show because of its name and its huge cultural significance. Think, wow, I'm going to be directing a Doctor Who, and then they're given this. They're given one of these scripts. their heart must just sink. As the process goes along, think, oh well, at least I can say that I worked on Doctor Who. I suppose there's that. But when you're responsible or a key figure in one of the worst episodes of all time, as most of this run have been, there's not really a great deal amount of kudos to be got from that. And I can see people in time actually leaving their Doctor Who credits off their CV to try and get more work. People think, hang on, who was the Doctor when that was made? Oh, well, in that case, we might want to give that person a pass. Before we leave the episode entirely, I want to ask you both about this scene between Dan and Yaz, because this is Thasmin, isn't it? That's the thing. Hashtag Thasmin. This is largely a thing that was born on Twitter. So the slash fiction relationship crush, what would you want to call it? Unrequited love between Yaz and the Doctor. In my view, and from my memory, and I'll admit, I haven't rewatched many of these episodes, it's never really been present on screen. It was entirely something born from the fandom. But here it is incorporated into the story, and we get this scene towards, I think it's around the 3/4 mark, where Dan notices that Yaz does seem to be very, very invested in the Doctor and has this deeper connection to her, and asks her about it. Have you told her? That's the very simple question that he puts to Yaz, isn't it? And we get a conversation, we get a scene which is quite nicely played by both Mandip Gill and John Bishop. But it's way too little too late with any of these characters, isn't it? It doesn't, you can see that it's a kind of afterthought. And I think if they were going to do this, they probably should have, if not, I'm not saying they should have made it the focus of any episode, but it would have been ideal really to bring it through a lot earlier. Yaz has been there for a very long time, and yet this is kind of the first that we're hearing about it. And so in my view, it would have been far, far better to not necessarily retcon this or to put something on screen that would mean that the people who invested in hashtag Thasmin, that it would sort of wipe that from existence, to take that away from them. But they probably shouldn't have put it on screen at all if this is all that there's ever going to be, Charlotte. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for me, this is the perfect example of bare minimum effort for a relationship.
Because it can't go, the people who are invested, it can't go where they really wanted to go, can it? So, well, in some ways, why bother?
Well, no, and the problem is also, we've had sort of the two versions, in New Who especially, of a companion falling for the Doctor. We've had Rose, which was, you could tell the Doctor was feeling similar. You could see that multiple times in Tennant's incarnation. So when he did have the big romantic scene with her, it felt natural. It felt like it was built up. And then what this is a bit more closer to is the Martha Jones storyline of sort of looking at the Doctor falling in love, but the Doctor not quite showing it back. And this is a really pale imitation of what Martha had, because like you said, it's not been done right. It's not been like a little bit of something in series 11 and then a bit more in series 12 and then a proper something in series 13, and then it could like be the capping off point in the specials. It's just not, and we know this because Matt Stevens, when he did do a little bit of media when he left, he admitted to the press that this was an afterthought. He basically said that in series 11 they didn't put it in, but I think it was Manip or Jodie, I can't remember.
It never even crossed their minds.
No, and basically one of the actresses went, "Oh look, on Twitter people are saying there's this Thasmin thing." He admitted they forgot about it, was his wording in series 12. And then in series 13, he was like, "Oh, we'll play around with it." And I was just thinking this just to finish, like, we've all said that Yaz hasn't really been defined well. She's sort of been this meandering companion. I'm sorry, would it not have been a really good companion sort of arc to have a companion discover their sexuality and to actually explore that and to actually have that as Yasmin's main sort of character motivation, I think that would have been really good. But no,
I
it's just sort of.
I think you could question as to whether that would be viable within a show, within a family adventure serial. But I think to do that softly
That's what
from the corners could have been effective. It could have been of value to people in the audience who maybe they're going through similar or have gone through similar. I think there'd have been an ability to that, and I think it would have been viable. Yeah, you'd have always had some people who are against it for whatever reason, simply because they just want sci-fi and action all the time, or people who are a little more, how can I put this, more backward in their thinking. People like that will say what they like. The way I feel about it is that, it's slash fiction, Kyle. It's been around for a long time, hasn't it? We talk, I think, since the 80s, since early Star Trek fan fiction. I've got nothing against slash fiction because I don't have to read the stuff. It's always badly written. I don't go anywhere near it. Out of sight, out of mind. But as much as it's not for me, I would never want to rob people who are invested in that of the thing that they like, to put it up on screen at all, to legitimize something that is just simply in existence within a minority of people, when you should be ideally thinking of your characters and delivering the best show you possibly can for the widest audience.
So here's the thing. You talk about fan fiction. For so long, it was people would write it, they'd share it with themselves at conventions, and then the early days of the internet, that you had that. We're now at the point where now the fan fiction is getting forced down our throat. The people just put it on Twitter, put it on social media, whatever, and it gets kind of forced down your throat. And here's the scary part to me of that aspect of this, is that the fact that these fan fictions are now influencing the writers of these shows, and then instead of them sticking to what their vision is, because they're so concerned about the ratings, about pleasing the fans, instead of sticking to their own vision. And then we get what what this was, which is basically we're going to shoehorn this in, and it's so poorly done. And to me, I guess for me with Doctor Who at this point is, you're never going to top the romantic story of either Doctor and Rose or Doctor and River Song. You're not going to do it. And even like Charlotte, you talk about Martha Jones. I agree with you. And what made that Martha Jones story work so well was because we knew the Doctor was on kind of a rebound. He was still recovering from Rose, and here you had somebody who had this unequated attraction and love. Now, was it for the person or was it for the dynamic the Doctor brings in? Then you go to here, and not only do you have all of a sudden this character being in love with the Doctor, but this character deciding she's gay out of the blue. No indication at all of this throughout this run, and it's handled so poorly that I'm honestly surprised there was not a bigger reaction from the LGBTQ community going, "What are you doing? This is like a slap in the face."
Yes, because they're not usually so shy and retiring, are they?
on how you handled this. And I because I honestly felt like it was just handled like it was a throwaway thing. And what I mean is we, even though if we've had a character who, we just kind of find out casually what their sexuality is here, in this, she basically says the line, "I didn't even know this about myself." This is like a major life-changing thing for a person to realize, and it's just completely thrown away as an afterthought. And it's a shame, because it could have been a great storyline that went through this run of Doctor Who, or where you have Yaz struggling with how she's feeling or what's going on with why is she, and having some conflict, or even just and then acceptance of herself. Instead, we've got out with the baby with the water, and it's just it's lazy writing, and it's been the curse of the 13th of this run of Doctor Who. Lazy writing, and it's terrible.
But at least they've had a fun time making it, Kyle. That's what counts, isn't it?
Hey, you know what? I give him credit. If one thing about it is that they have come across, at least the actors, as a fairly, like they did bond throughout this.
Yeah.
And I mean, they could be at each other's throats. This is how this has gone. I have a feeling that Jodie Chibnall or Jodie Whittaker will have nothing to do with Chris Chibnall by the time this is all said and done, because I think he's done more damage to her career than anybody could have imagined when this started.
I think you could be right. And just to be a little bit more upbeat, because we've given this episode a real hard time. I know we have. I've only been this condemning because I do feel that there was something here, that this could have been good. It could at least have been serviceable. That's why I feel the way that I do about it. But just to end on a sort of positive, I thought that Aisling B, her look, the pullover, the cardigan, whatever you want to call that knitwear, how doctorish that kind of was. Those scenes where she was running down the corridor with the sort of long wavy hair and her unusual face. She's an attractive woman, but quite unusual looking. I thought, I don't believe in the gender swap female doctor. It's not for me. I didn't think it would work, and I was right. All that's the disclaimer out of the way. I think that in some scenes in here, she looked a lot more like what I would expect a female doctor to look like than Jodie Whittaker. I think she was kind of dressed like the Doctor and has that kind of quality about her. Anybody else? Is that just me?
I can understand the dress, but again, and it was the character she was playing. The character was so irredeemable in my opinion, because she was just not a good person. I mean, at the end of the day, but she does have that look. I would like to see her in something else to see, if she could possibly have that kind of energy to her. But yeah, the look of it is probably more of a look of the Doctor than Jodie's look is. That's for sure.
Well, I've seen her on panel shows because she's quite a regular in the UK on that, just as herself. And she comes across a bit zany, like lovely and a bit zany and a little bit just odd. And I think she's got a good energy about her, which you could use.
I think that's what I was picking up
Doctor on. Yeah, if you ever see her do, because she's really a stand-up. Like you said, she's done bits of acting, but she's known as a stand-up. She's quite funny. So I think as a personality, she would suit a possible female Doctor, but I don't know if she could have the acting. But like the outfit, and like I just said, her as herself, yes, I could say.
I think what it is, I got the feeling watching this that Aisling is a lot more likable than Sarah was, and that's under the surface trying to come through, but it can't because of the material. But yeah, nice jumper, Aisling. I like that very much. Okay, so that's our fashion section out of the way and the bulk of our review. It's time for us to take a couple of minutes break and for you to listen up and to open your minds to the wonder of everything else that's going on across all the other shows across the Fandom Podcast Network. Now, here's our mate Kevin with a few words about all of that. You can meet Kyle, Charlotte, and myself back here in a couple of minutes for our rankings and the ratings of Eve of the Daleks. What's that?
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Yes, we've teased and tantalized you there with all of that, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of the shows, including Type 40. If you head over to tpublic.com, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and there you'll find a store full of all the team colours for all of those shows, on everything from the T-shirts to phone cases and those huge tapestries. Treat yourself. Treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain, so everybody wins. Yet we're not in a time loop. Kyle and Charlotte, they haven't made it out. They're here. They can't escape. And we're going to look again at Eve of the Daleks and the stats, the rankings, the ratings, the very things that would have had Chris Chibnall and Matt Stevens crying into their pot noodles as they looked at these figures as they were coming in. Yet again, it wasn't very good. It wasn't very good at all. And we've got everything right here. Why are Doctor Who fans obsessed with ratings? Well, I'm afraid we always have been. It's just something that you're going to have to live with. Okay. We know the way that the arrow had gone all the way through the Jodie Whittaker era, barring a few little blips. I think when John Barrowman came back to the show, there was a bit of a bump. And that was pretty much it. It's been downhill ever since, and it won't be a surprise. I won't labour the point. Things dropped even more so with Eve of the Daleks. You know, it's traditional that there would actually be a ratings bump, isn't it, Charlotte, for a Christmas / festive special? It's not been happening the last couple of years, though, has it?
Well, weirdly though, Jodie would always get a good bump. I remember thinking that at the time, that the series ratings are always downward, but her specials always seem to get a bit of like that bump. But this was actually the opposite. And I remember at the time when these ratings came out, especially the overnights, even I was like, "Oh, that's bad."
Yeah, this is bad news. Bad news in pretty much every respect. So this was 3.21 million viewers overnight. It did go up a little to 4.3 for the consolidated figure. So that's the one that they bring out about a week or so later, including all the iPlayer figures. Let's just accept as well that iPlayer, now it counts as a view if you watch for 2 minutes, isn't it? 2 minutes counts as a view.
I thought it was seconds. Maybe I'm wrong.
It could. I think they're bringing it down all of the time, and there's a third figure that they sort of farted into existence a little while ago. But at the end of the day, just 3.2 million people could be bothered watching this on the day. And the AI figure, that's the Audience Appreciation Index figure, that's the one where people at home, that cross-section of the public have got those little boxes, and they register after the fact how much they enjoyed the show that they've just watched. That AI figure just came in at 77. So again, it's not quite as low as that final episode of Flux, but it's not good either. So this is as high as it's, not quite as high as it got. So it's on a par with episode 2 of Flux, which was the one with the Sontarans in War of the Sontarans. It did sort of get back there when they brought the Weeping Angels back. This is, again, lesser than you would expect for that big show with the Daleks, and very, very sort of crowd-pleasing. Didn't seem to please many people. And Kyle, over in America, the story, it's getting worse and worse and worse for Doctor Who, isn't it? The ratings just drip and drop and drop and drop. And actually, there was a slight increase on this, a very slight increase on this from the finale of Flux, but it's not by much. This is still a very sorry state of affairs from the previous hires of the Peter Capaldi era, where Doctor Who was in pretty good health on BBC America.
Yeah, let me just do something here. Beyond repair. There's always going to be a little bit of bump for the Doctor on the holiday specials, obviously, especially here in the U.S. because they are so beloved. But it's a moot point. Doctor Who right now in the United States is dead on arrival. Here's how bad it is right now in the U.S. The streaming service that is on HBO Max is in complete disarray right now because of things that are going on with the Discovery Channel having purchased Warner Brothers Media, which owns HBO Max, and they're canceling things left and right. There have been big rumors that Doctor Who streaming rights are going to shift possibly over to the mouse, which if I'm a Doctor Who fan, I'm not sure that's a great thing, because when the mouse tends to get their hands on something, they can't just get it and leave it alone unless Kevin Feige is there as the ultimate shield to block it. But there is no Kevin Feige, and I would be very worried about Doctor Who if the mouse gets their hands on it. So
it makes you wonder how advanced the talks are as regards Disney Plus. I would have thought, I was surprised to see the news about HBO Max as well, because obviously Doctor Who and the BBC have had this long-standing arrangement with Warners, haven't they? With Time Warners, as it was known in the 80s. And so the thought that it may go elsewhere, it's obviously another unknown quantity, just as another one at a time where Sony have just got involved too. And it does make you wonder what the show will look like internationally in a few years' time. Obviously, it couldn't really be much worse than it is now for the international audience. But if they started to levy some sort of influence editorially on the show, I think the Bad Wolf Studios wouldn't react favorably to that. So we'll have to keep our eye on where that's going to go. I can't quite see it myself.
It's kind of interesting in the aspect I almost feel like Doctor Who itself right now is under siege, because you've got Sony with their ties with Bad Wolf, a possibility of Disney getting involved on the streaming side, and obviously whatever craziness is happening over with the BBC right now. And Doctor Who's just kind of caught in this middle of almost this tug of war, and you've got Russell there just like he's in the TARDIS door with his Sonic holding off all these forces to try and keep the ship.
Funny, right? Isn't it, Charlotte? Because when we think about this show here, this national institution that's so associated with the BBC, I suppose internationally and within the industry, at a time of such great change and evolution and excitement, where things are changing so quickly, it's not surprising, is it, that there could be people in boardrooms who are thinking, with streaming services everywhere, thinking, if only we had a brand, if only we had a brand name and a big franchise that had great pulling power and a dedicated audience that we could put at the center of this. Paramount Plus have now got it with Star Trek. There must be places out there crying out for something with that pre-established bankability. And yet there's the BBC with Doctor Who, very publicly having run it into the ground like that. It's not that surprising I don't want to describe them as the vultures circling, but it's hard not to see it like that. And it's completely feasible how Kyle described it, that people could be watching and waiting and wondering how much that they would have to pay to get their hands and their minds on Doctor Who, is it?
I think it's no coincidence that this isn't happening like in the middle of the Chibnall era or at the beginning of the Chibnall era. It's happening when a new era is just on the horizon. And I just think that's the appeal, honestly, that you've got Russell, you've got Bad Wolf, you've got this completely different energy coming into the show, which we all hope takes it to a direction where it can be TV we love again and we want to watch every week again. And that's what I think it could be, that they're seeing this new star, and possibly Disney, or we know Sony has got their chunk, and they're just seeing that. And also, sci-fi is hard to make, and Doctor Who is such an establishment of sci-fi that, from my understanding, obviously I don't have Disney Plus, but I know they've got Star Wars, but Doctor Who is different. They want that sort of more British type of sci-fi that can stand up by itself.
Here's the thing, and I don't mean to get us sidetracked off of what we're doing with the episode, but Disney Plus is still continuing to evolve. Now, internationally, Disney Plus also hosts all the stuff that would normally here in the US go on Hulu and things like that. So like internationally, like Predator Prey, which is a Hulu in the US, is a Hulu. That's actually on Disney Plus internationally. So Disney Plus does have a wide variety, and it's changing here in the States. For the first time ever, they have R-rated movies now on Disney Plus. They put in some parental controls. They've added the 2 Deadpool films as well as the Logan film. So they are expanding. There's a lot of feeling that once some contractual things get squared away, Hulu will just be absorbed into Disney Plus and all be under a Disney Plus banner. Disney's always looking for IP. And I think the Doctor is a very intriguing IP for Disney as something internationally worldwide that they could groom and get their hands on. It's just a matter of what's going to happen here. And this kind of leads me to another question. Just a quick question I have for you two, because there's no buzz for Doctor Who in the States anymore. There really isn't. It's you're a fan of it, but there's no buzz. Like even when Jodie first came on, that buzz is gone. What has been the feelings about our new Doctor that's coming? Because everything I see here in the States, the only 2 things they talk about is Tennant coming back and RTD. They don't talk about the new Doctor at all. He's like he's not even an afterthought. He's just
very briefly. I think because Sex Education is quite a low profile show in Great Britain, and the people who know about it love it, and therefore they know Ncuti Gatwa and they love him too. So there's a bit of a cap on enthusiasm for him and for the prospect of him being in Doctor Who. Firstly, because it seems like a long way off in the future. You tell the British public that, this exciting thing's coming. When's it coming? In 3 years' time. Oh, okay. Well, tell me nearer the time. So there's that too. Then there's the fact that they've never seen this guy, don't really know him from anything. And then thirdly, there's the fact that to the general audience, Doctor Who now looks like a show that, until recently, until the Tennant announcement, was looking like a show that needed to be taken out behind the shed and have a gun put to its head. It looks like a total lame animal that needed putting down, that needed a rest. I think the reveal about David Tennant and Catherine Tate coming back has jolted people, but I think it will take a lot more than that. What do you think, Charlotte? Am I along the right lines?
Yeah, no, I think it's honestly because Ncuti isn't having like a high profile himself right now, which I think is the clever approach. He's not sort of putting himself out a lot. He's obviously on some social media, and there has been some events he's been photoed at, but he's been quite quiet for like an incoming Doctor.
He seems aware that it's not his show yet, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he seems respectful, professional, mindful. That's what I'm saying. I like that but I think that's the right approach. But I think that's why he's not being excited. But I like him a lot.
I do. He comes across as so humble
as a man
and such a lovely bloke. But that's the point. He's not putting himself to be like, look at me. Whereas you've got Tennant, who's very sort of, he does little videos in his trailer. He's very out there. He's very visible. So,
but he's Tennant.
Yeah,
so he can get away with it. So let me ask you guys this: 2 questions, and we'll get back to it. One, is it kind of like a feeling when Matt Smith was coming on, where it's an unknown factor, so we're kind of waiting and seeing what's happening? And 2, do you think it's more impactful the fact that it's going to be Tennant handing off the Doctor to this gentleman instead of it going from Jodie to this gentleman? Like,
I don't think people have realized what's coming when, in what order yet. I think you simply can't see what's happening. I think it's very similar to the Matt Smith situation, but of course the big difference then was when we're in that period between Tennant going and Matt Smith taking over, Doctor Who was still the biggest show on British TV. Now it looks disheveled, it looks tired, hardly anybody talks about it, and even fewer people seem to watch it. And so the situations, it's kind of apples from oranges as well. I think as regards the history of the show, and for the fan base, it's very similar to the Matt Smith situation. There's an exciting new young actor that's sort of like a best kept secret. Like the people who know him are really excited about this because they know what he can do. Everybody else is going, who is he? And kind of like I am, I'm tempted to go and binge watch Sex Education. But the other side of me is saying, no, I want this guy to be a surprise. I don't want to have any preconceived ideas. I just want to see him as the Doctor. So it's different but the same.
Because
I
I was going to say, because I've heard a lot of rumors that Jodie's going to regenerate into Tennant, and then Tennant will then kind of.
That's what I believe will happen from what I've
into the new Doctor.
Heard.
And I just think that if it is, it's a brilliant move, because I think it gets a lot of people's eyes on David Tennant to where, and then the transition to this new Doctor, instead of going from to Jodie to this new Doctor, where people might not have their eyes on it quite as much.
I mean, I think go on, sorry.
I think it gives needed space between Ncuti and this era. I think he needs that sort of block of space to separate, because this era has been so, either if you know about it, it's been toxic, it's not been liked, or like Dan said, if you're the general public, it's not registered. So I think that I agree, it's a clever move, but like Dan was sort of saying, I think we're going to be in a very different situation when the 60th anniversary actually starts to roll in. Right now, I've sort of said this in a few shows, we're in this weird limbo that Jodie and Chibnall still haven't finished on television. I know the production's finished, so we're still technically in this era, and we're waiting for the 60th to start. So it's such an awkward phase we are in the fandom right now.
Dan, can you do me a favor? Will you bring up that picture of Chris Chibnall again? You just pat on the screen briefly.
That's a very strange request, young man, but we can make that happen.
Okay, tell me that is not Newman from Seinfeld.
Some people out there who may be well versed in that show, let us know. Get in touch, Instagram and Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who. Does Chris Chibnall look like Newman from Seinfeld? There, is that a case? Separated at birth? We need to know the answers to these questions. I think, yes, it's very much a case that people are over it. And I mean, we had the whole thing where last September, October, they announced that Russell was coming back. And so nobody was really interested in Flux. I think that's even more so now. And the fact that there is that 90-minute special to come, it's rumored to be mid-October, so it's just a little while off now. It's kind of people looking at their clocks, thinking, "Oh God, really?" it's all over, and I don't take any delight in saying that. It's like this episode of the show. Really, it's about the fact that we enjoy being in one another's company and like talking about this show, this television show to you. It does feel like we are kind of doing an autopsy on this now. And that's a sad state of affairs to be in, which does bring me to my final question, really. If you had to rank this episode of Doctor Who, Eve of the Daleks, how many ex-girlfriends out of 5 would you give it, Kyle?
I'm going to be, in my opinion, generous. I'm going to give it 2.5. Because I do think there was a great concept there that was just not poorly. That was not, and that's what's frustrating with it. But there's some things in here I did like. I think there's some concepts in there I liked. I like the fact that we actually had the TARDIS team together for a whole episode, not split apart, and we actually got to see some interaction between them. But again, it's the absolute frustrating thing. 2.5 is probably the highest marks I can give it, Chibnall. At this point.
I think that's really generous. I got to be honest. Fair play to you. How many ex-girlfriends out of 5 do you give it, Charlotte?
Oh, I'm struggling because we didn't have time, but I thought there was some lovely special effects with the TARDIS like resetting and going in on itself. I thought that was gorgeous bit of special
nice effects work.
So
there's been nice effects work all the way through the Whittaker era in fits and starts, isn't there?
Yeah, so I want to give that a bit of credit. I do agree that Sarah was annoying, but the actress Godlover was trying her best. So I feel like that needs to sort of be given a bit of props. And the time loop could have worked. I agree with you. He actually, for once, didn't have a bad concept. It was a good concept done terribly. So I'll give it a 2.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I'd give it a 2 for mostly the same reasons. At least this is, on paper, a Doctor Who story. At least the Daleks were sort of okay. At least it's all it all feels like that. It's like looking for things to praise it for rather than to continually do it down. I thought the direction was pretty good as well, and that's really all I've got. It's not the fact that it was particularly good; it's the fact that it was nowhere near as bad as some of the depths that we've seen Doctor Who plumb to on Chris Chibnall's watch up to this point. Eve of the Daleks is available already on DVD and Blu-ray as a double pack with a Legend of the Sea Devils. That's the special that came afterwards. So you can get that now, should you wish, if you're a completist still into the physical media, just like me. I would imagine that it's streaming. It's on the iPlayer at the moment here in the UK, Kyle, but where can people see it in America now? Is it on BBC America? Is it on Apple? I can never quite remember where it's streamed.
You can purchase it on Apple iTunes. I don't know if it's on HBO Max with their streaming of Doctor Who as of yet. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't watched it yet. I've been a little... it came out during my busiest time of work, and just hearing what I heard from everybody in the Type 40 community about it and what I've seen in other places, I don't know if I'm really ready to sacrifice that much time of my life to that particular episode of Doctor Who. I will, because I do plan on coming back for when we talk about that episode here on Type 40 to bring my perspective on it. But yeah, just the concept alone kind of even scares me a little bit.
Well,
here.
Kyle, just to reassure you, my friend, we'll be here for you.
Yeah.
It'll be like Lucy, the doctor is in. Pop your 5 cents in the can.
Oh yes, so yeah, don't miss that coming up. We're going to be bang up to date in next to no time with our review of Legend of the Sea Devils, which was that last special. Standard special that's a bit less special than the other special. I don't know how we classify specials when it comes to Doctor Who anymore, but we'll be talking about Legend of the Sea Devils in due course. But that is the old girl starting up and calling time on this edition of Type 40. I'll be back with another one soon. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been over on the dedicated home feed for Type 40, type40.podbean.com. Maybe we rolled up on the podcatcher of your choice, so it could have been Audible, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, all those places. We're absolutely everywhere. All this here on YouTube too. On YouTube too, on the Spacebook YouTube channel. We're still on the fabulous God blimey. We're still on the fabulous Fandom Podcast Network's master feed, along with all those other treats for your ears not on the weekly, it's on the daily, isn't it, Kyle?
Oh, there's so much on the Fandom Podcast Network right now. I don't know which way I'm going. Up is down, left is right, right is left. I'm thinking it's just diagonal from here on out.
And yeah, what else? Yes, maybe you'd like to get in touch with us. You can do that. Instagram and Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who, or you can email us type40doctorwho@gmail.com. If you're feeling really, really brave, you can reach out to us in real time by joining the Type 40 Facebook group. That's full of regeneration upon regeneration cycles worth of Doctor Who fans, where we're talking about classic Doctor Who, as always, all the cuddly, cozy, warm and fuzzy classic Doctor Who, new Doctor Who too, including those Jodie Whittaker episodes and that Centenary Special. And most of all, I think we're all looking forward to all new Doctor Who. That's to come with Russell T Davies, David Tennant, Neil Patrick Harris, Ncuti Gatwa, Catherine Tate, all that's to come in 2023 and beyond. We're very excited about what's to come. I think because it's the great unknown, and the only way is up, isn't it? Yeah, but we'll be back with a Legend of the Sea Devils review in due course, so don't miss that. Carl, where can people hear and see more from you and connect with you on social media and all the rest of it?
Well, first of all, can I just watch Waters of Mars again and pretend it was Legend of the Sea Devils?
I wish I could say yes.
Of course, you can find me all over the Fandom Podcast Network. Go to fpnet.podbean.com. Also visit our Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. We're doing all kinds of fun stuff there. You can find me on social media on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. And just a side note too, as always, I have been on this ride with Dan since he joined us with the Fandom Podcast Network in Type 40, and it's early early versions before he has regenerated it into this absolute powerhouse that it is now. And I just can't reiterate how proud I am of what Dan has done with this and the Spacebook and everything. And you are an institution now, my friend. And I'm just so proud and be proud to be even somewhat associated with it.
Oh, thank you. It is hard to imagine how far this has come in the last 4.5 years, isn't it?
That feels like longer. It might have been COVID. I don't know.
I think it's because, in some respects, we couldn't have picked a worse time to start talking about Doctor Who. But then again, when I think about some of the conversations that we have had over the last 4.5 years, despite what's been on screen, some of the conversations have been nothing short of gold. So thank you again, Kyle, for that. How about you, Charlotte? Where can people hear and see more of you?
Well, you can hear me on Type 40 Live with Dan and our lovely little group, and some of the podcasts that we did the Bernard Cribbins one. If you didn't listen to that, I would say please do, because I think it's such a lovely tribute, and it's Bernard, so just listen just to pay respect to him, if anything else. And then on YouTube as well, and thank you, Daniel, for renaming the channel. Now I've got to remember it. Scottish Stavros and Friends Wrestle with Pop Culture. I'm on there quite a bit with Daniel.
Yeah, that's a real mouthful. We'll have to whittle that down to an acronym, won't he?
Yeah. That's screaming acronym there.
Yeah, so don't miss that. We'll put links to all of it, of course, in the show notes and the description of the video. If you want to catch up with me, I'm on Instagram and Twitter I'm on Instagram and Twitter as the Spacebook, where I'm ranting and raving, I'm wheezing and groaning about all things geeky, whether that's inside or outside of the TARDIS in film and TV and comic books, sometimes even in real life too. I do have a real life, apparently, so they say. But yeah, you connect with me over on social media there. But that's it for this time. We always have the space. I can't speak. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40. But that is it for this time. We'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.